Hello, my name is Oscar Fire, and it's like 2 minutes since I stopped recording the previous video, but it's probably going to be like a day before I actually release it from when that one was released. Anyway, I'm here to talk about The Voyage of the Jerle Shannara, the trilogy. So, like I said when I first started it, I've started reading the 4-book series. One of the first of the 4 book series that I think are Terry Brooks' best work in the Shannara saga. And The Voyage of the Jerle Shannara did not disappoint. Everything about the series is really, really well written. It is just so solid and so interesting and so engaging. Like I said at the very beginning, I love how Terry Brooks decided to actually evolve his universe a little bit. By inventing new technology, by creating airships. I think it's interesting that Terry did not really fall into the potential trap of just writing the story about the invention of the first airships, but instead writing a story about airships, 3 decades after they've been invented. I thought that was a really clever touch because it allows him to start an adventure with airships, but airships are established enough that we don't have to go through the growing pains of airships. I think that was really clever, and I think it was really smart, and allowed him to travel beyond the 4 lands for once. And it's the only time, well, not the only time, because in the Fall of Shannara, he will, of course, travel beyond Shannara, beyond the 4 lands again. But we get to travel beyond the 4 lands, for an adventure. And I thought that was really good, really clever. And we got to see, because of course the 4 lands are, because of what we've learned from the Genesis of Shannara, which is published after this one, incidentally. But from what we learned from the Genesis of Shannara, but you could, of course, the reason that civilization is so entrenched in the 4 lands is, of course, because a group of survivors, with the help of magic, managed to preserve broader civilization, I should say, rather. Brain? Managed to preserve civilization from the end of the Great Wars and the end of World War III to the modern time, to the present time in the series. I said modern time, but modern time is what I'm referring to now. But from World War III to the present in the story. And so the end result is that when you really think about it, so the end, pretty much everything that has been plundered and everything, everything that's plunderable, everything that has value in the 4 lands has pretty much been plundered when it comes from the old world, right? With some rare exceptions. But even then, say the ruins in the Wolfskatag Mountains are very much, just empty ruins with just some dangerous beings in it, But when you go to Parcasia, except for some primitives, you still have things like Anthrax and Castledown, still operational. And you can imagine that in other places in the world, this is probably true as well. And I think that just the way that the Voyage of Jerle Shannara expands your consciousness of the world of Shannara is very interesting and very intriguing and very cool. Not to use a word that isn't too simple, I think, to convey what I'm trying to say, but it's really cool. But yeah, no, I was very happy to reread this. Now, the funny thing is that I seem to recall when I was younger, because I read this when I was probably 13, 14-ish, because that's about the age I would have been when it came out. When I read The Voyage of the Jerle Shannara, I remember thinking that I enjoyed it, but there was something that bothered me about it. And I didn't have the words for it then, but I do now. Excuse me. And the thing that bothers me the most about this series, because of course I'm going to criticize, but the thing that bothers me the most about this series, hands down, is that it's too dark. And now I'm not saying, just to head off any sort of arguments or anything, I'm not saying that I expect this to be a happy-go-lucky story, that I expect everything to turn out fine and nice and happy and joyous. But I do mean that too many dark things happen in this book. This series tried too hard to be edgy, almost. It felt like it was trying too hard to be intense and to have bad things happen to the characters. And I think that detracted from the story immensely. You know, the part where I kind of really got a little fed up with it, and granted, this is kind of where it stops, but the part where I really kind of got a little fed up with it is when, so at the beginning of the book, Arna Lesidil and Raya Ordstar, the seer, the traitor seer who has a little bit of a face heel turn. She helps Aaron get captured, and about halfway into the book, or not halfway, yeah, into the book, she helps Aaron escape from the clutches of the Morgawr. But of course, she obviously is the one who did it, and so the Morgawr, basically, it says she gives her to Bega, the Mwelret commander, and the Mwelrets aboard the Black Moclips, and essentially they beat, mutilate, and rape her to death. Not so explicitly, and she basically suffers like hanging on like the forecastle of the Black Moclips until she dies. And I just thought that was so dark and so unnecessarily dark. Honest to goodness, I know that at the very beginning of the series, Raya sees her death, and when she can, because she's a seer, she can foresee it, and so she's not going to be able to forestall it. That is going to happen eventually, right? But that doesn't change the fact that I'm super bothered by that. Because I said it in Anthrax, when I was talking about Anthrax, about how, just having pretty much all of Quentin's group die. Except it doesn't, because of course I knew Panax was already alive, I knew Panax survived in this one. And as it turns out, Kyan, the elven hunter Kyan, is still alive. And that's some weird, confusing writing. There's lots of weird, confused writing in this series. I've noticed confusion as to where the Jerle Shannara is being repaired in relation to the rest of Arcasia, because on the map it says it's to the west, but in Anthrax it says to the east, but in Morgawr that direction gets fixed and they're fleeing east toward Castle Down, and it's just, there's lots of weird little confused moments like that I guess there was never a second edition of the book to fix these problems. At one point, like I said, I thought that both Kyan and Y, the elven hunters, were dead. But in Anthrax, it does mention that when Tamis and Quentin reach the Ringe village, one of the elves is dead there, but unidentifiable. And I thought that was really confusing, because I'm like, but it said Y was already cut down, right? And I think maybe what happened is that in Anthrax, what it said is that when they got ambushed and separated by the Ard Patronel rank, that what happened is that Y just got knocked aside while the two Ringe were cut down. But I thought it meant that all three had been cut down. Because that's kind of how it's written. It's kind of how it reads. And it turns out Y just died off screen later on. And Kyan lives. And then he dies, by the way. And Bega kills him in the ruins of Mephitic. And I'm like... Sorry, that peaked the mic. But... none of the elven hunters live in the end, and it's like, and this goes back to the point I'm making originally, and that's Terry Brooks was way too keen on his body count in this one. Because by all accounts, this expedition is a total disaster. 70% of the expedition is dead. Actually, probably more. It's probably 75-80% of the expedition has died by the end. Hundreds of people have died directly and indirectly because of this expedition. From all the Mwelrets that were with the Morgawr, the crew of the Black Moclips, all the people who crewed the Morgawr's fleet, 75-80% of the Jerle Shannara expedition. All these people are dead. And and it's just, and what do they get out of it? They retrieve the Elfstones and they redeem Rayanne Omsford. Like, I don't think Terry Brooks really thought through the implications of what he was doing in this story. Like, legitimately, I don't think he thought through, like the fact that this conclusion is quite possibly one of the least satisfying ones in the entire saga. You know, because let's think about it. In the Sword of Shannara, you know, like Tircis is almost overrun, right? You know, the army is, you know, the Border Legion is almost completely is decimated by the Warlock Lord's forces. You know, we lose the dwarf, forgot his name, unfortunately. I wish I remembered his name, and I have all the books right there, but I'm not gonna check. I'm just gonna live with the fact that I forgot the poor man's name. You know, but the Border Legion is decimated, but Shay Omsford destroys the Warlock Lord, and the end result is that it's worth it. 50 years later, in the Elfstones of Shannara, you know, the Allied forces defending Arborlon are badly decimated, right, by the demon onslaught. You know, almost everyone who goes on the quest for the Bloodfire is killed. But the demons are back in the Forbidding. So, it was worth it. The Wish Song of Shannara. You know, almost all of Jerle Omsford's adventuring party, as I guess you could call it, is killed in the is killed on their quest. But the Ildatch is destroyed and Bryn Omsford is saved. Worth it. Strangely enough, the Heritage of Shannara is not very dark. Like, most people survive it. You know, most of the people in that journey survive. So, you know, I mean, there's heavy casualties among the elves and so forth, and of course the escape from Morrowind is harrowing, but in the very end, it's not that bad. Things turn out pretty okay, and at the end of the day, the Shadowmen are defeated. The Federation retreats from the northern lands, and from the borderlands, I should say, and you know what? Worth it. The Voyage of the Jerle Shannara, we got the Elfstones, we redeemed Rayanne Omsford, we didn't get any magic, we didn't get any technology. They got almost nothing out of it except hundreds of people dead. Not worth it. I am reminded of one of my favorite quotes from Star Trek. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. I don't think the story itself justifies what happens. I don't think internally, in universe, what happens is justified. It is just a tragedy all around with barely any meaningful results except the restoration of the Druid Order. And I'm telling you right now, that does not feel worth it. It feels, it's dark, it's horrifying, it's depressing, and you don't even get much of anything in exchange for it. And it sucks, honestly. It sucks. I don't think, like I said, I don't think Terry Brooks really thought about the implications of what happens in this story. You know? A lot of people are hurt, and the survivors are traumatized. The survivors are traumatized by everything they experienced. You know? Rayanne Omsford realizes, oh, I've been a monster for 15 years. Crap. You know, Beck gets to see, Beck and Quentin and everyone gets to see all their friends die. You know, the most powerful man in the Four Lands is killed. And I hate that. I legitimately hate that. I don't think that, let me put it to you this way. I hate that, but I still love the story. I like the story that we were given. The story we were given makes sense in terms of its own merits. The story makes sense. It's good. It's exciting. It's riveting. It keeps you engaged all the way throughout. In terms of its own merits, the Voyage of the Jerle Shannara is fantastic. But from that sort of broader, almost moral sense, that broader sense of what the story is about and what is going on, what the story is, what the story is trying to advance, I guess. it's not worth it at all. It's a horrible tragedy, and it feels like the story itself doesn't take that part of itself seriously enough. I just find myself so frustrated by it. Like, I've been thinking about it for days, and I can't. I've bandied it about. I've been thinking about it. I've been working it around in my head. Like, is there any way in which this outcome is fine? And just, no, it's not. It's not fine. And, I mean, on some level, is it personal preference? Sure. I won't deny that. And personal preference factors into how I feel about it. But that doesn't change the fact that it's just too much. It's too much to, like, fully enjoy and embrace and love, you know? And I find that a little frustrating, you know? I mean, let's look at Walker Bow. Walker Bow technically dies in utter failure. He betrays, you know, because, you know, in the Heritage of Shannara, he's obsessed with not becoming a druid because he doesn't want to become the kind of person that druids are. You know, they're secretive and they employ subterfuge and they don't tell the whole truth. And then, like I said, Al-Anon was justified in doing that in the original Shannara trilogy. You know, there's reasons the druids do that, but I also fully understand why Walker Bow hates that aspect of druids. That makes sense too. You know, there's no reason for Walker to not hate that aspect of the druids. But in the end, he ends up betraying those principles and becomes the exact person he didn't want to be in the Voyage of the Jerle Shannara. And bear in mind, I think for the most part, you know, Walker was justified here too. I think he's less justified in not telling people more things earlier on, but I think that, you know, I think that is just kind of silly. You know, I mean, Walker knew from the outset that they were getting technology, not magic, from Castle Down. Why not just be honest about that from the first? Maybe you don't have to tell Kylan Alesidil and his father, whatever his name was, can't remember. Maybe you don't have to tell them that, but once the journey starts, like, say, we're actually going after magic, we're going after technology. What's wrong with that? Why not tell people that? Why make people believe that they're looking for magic when they're clearly not? You know? I mean, maybe that forestalls some of the tragedy too, because what's the Morgawer gonna care about technology when he's more interested in magic? You know, what's he gonna care about it? Maybe the Ilsa Witch doesn't follow along too, and part of the purpose of the mission was to save the Ilsa Witch. There's just. And, you know, and then, of course, Walker doesn't get to start the Druid Order either. That ends up falling to Grianne. But it's frustrating. It's very frustrating to me. I don't... It's a very frustrating story because it's like, it just didn't have to be so tragic, you know? Like I said, it's like, you know, Riot Ward Star dies in a horrible, horrific way. And I mean, it's not explicit or anything, but it's very clear that's what happens. And, you know, it's explicitly states she's beaten and she's mutilated. And it's all but stated that she's raped, you know? And it's like, why does she have to die that way? You know, like I said when I was reviewing the last book, why does Tamis have to die? You know, why can't Quentin's group be largely intact and the others are the ones that kind of suffer more? You know, what's wrong with that? You know, why do all the Elven Hunters have to die? Why couldn't poor Kyan just live? Why did he have to die? You know? Why does Walker have to die? I mean, it's fine that Walker dies, but again, he dies not having achieved very much and having to just kind of push it off on everyone else. Even though Walker could theoretically have lived 1,000 years. You know, the use of the Druid sleep. So, why? Why'd you do that? Why'd you have to do that? Why'd you have to make Walker a failure? And he essentially is. I mean, his successors succeed. It's just makes you kind of feel poopy when you think about it. You know, it's like Quentin Leah suffers all this trauma. You know, half the rovers die. There's all these things that I just. Let's talk about something I really enjoyed in the book. I love the romance. I love the romance between Beck and Rue Meridian. You know, I love how I love how between the two of them, like we don't even actually really see we really don't even see the romance like kind of grow, right? We don't even really get to see that. What we get to see is the way they miss each other after the fact, after they're separated for a long period of time, and the way their thoughts keep straying back to one another. And then, when they finally are reunited in the third book, the way they kind of just together, the way they just kind of just mesh immediately, and everyone's like, why did that happen? I love it. I like the mildly comedic nature of it. I think that's very charming and very endearing, and really, really nice. It's a really nice break from all the horror and tragedy, But it also makes me regret the fact that, at one point, Quentin, even though he rejects the idea out of hand, the way Quentin notices that Tamis is kind of pretty, and maybe, in another circumstance, he might have actually pursued it. I think it's sad that couldn't become a thing, right? Or the way that, Aaron Alesidil realizes that he, I don't know if he loves Ryer Ordstar. He says he does. The book says he does, but it's like, it's probably more that he just kind of has like, it's more like strong affection for her because they spend so much time together, right? And it could burgeon into something, and it just doesn't become anything because she dies. It's like, I feel like, why? It's like, why couldn't she be saved? I feel like it's very. I feel like Ryer Ordstar's death bothers me the most because it feels like she's the character because she was a traitor originally, and just betrays the Ilsa witch. It feels to me distinctly like she deserved to actually be saved and not end up the way she did. And I just find myself so disappointed by that part, but at the same time, I like that we have that one solid romantic subplot and the way it kind of like makes, especially the third book, just kind of gel together and work so well. I wish we had gotten a little more hint that the Morgawer existed before this point, though, because this book states that he's the brother of the two witches from the Elfstones of Shannara, Malinro and Morag, and we just see no evidence that he exists. He didn't exist then. He doesn't exist in the interim, and he only exists now. Like, you would think that even with the Shadowin running around, then the Morgawer would be more present in the, like 130 years earlier, since there's no druids hampering him anyway. So why wouldn't he be there? Even with the Shadowin around, he could strive against them. But instead, he just kind of shows up as a villain here, and you're just like, okay, just a random guy from nowhere, and he dies at the end, and he feels very villain of the weekish, and it just doesn't. For someone who's ostensibly so powerful, and he is powerful, and he is threatening, and he is scary, why precisely is he not more of a presence? Why, like Terry Brooks made a really poor decision here, I think, in making a villain that's ostensibly so powerful, but ultimately is not a player except in this story specifically. Unless he's hinted at in other stories, but I don't think he is, because it's very clear. It's very transparently obvious that the Morgawer as a character was invented for this story and this story alone. And it undermines the character of Morgawer as a threat and as a villain. And I wish that wasn't the case. I wish he had handled it a little, I don't know, smarter or something. I think that maybe, I don't know. I mean, I could have a million ideas, but it's all like, 2020 hindsight ideas. And I don't always like to like flesh those ideas out because they're not always like great ideas. They're just thoughts about like ways it could have been done smarter. Not better necessarily, but smarter. But yeah, no, I think that I think it's a little bit weird. But that's enough of that. Honestly, though, in the end of the day, though, these were 3 fantastic books. The stories were so well written, and I actually, even though this review in particular was kind of a little delayed, I chewed through these books so quickly. I read them so fast. Ilsa Witch I read a little slower. It's slightly longer than the other 2, and it's slower paced. So I didn't like just run through it. But Antrax and Morgawer, I just wanted to reach the end because I was so excited to know what was happening next, how it was going to go, because I didn't remember it all. You know, I didn't have a thorough memory. The only series I have thorough, proper memories of are Defenders and Fall. So when I get to those, I'm probably going to chug through them a little bit, actually. But you know, those are the ones I'm going to read slowly. Whereas these, it's like reliving the magic all over again. I'm really, really glad for that. I'm really glad that these books held up, and I'm glad also that I kind of fully grasped how I felt about them, you know, 20 years ago compared to now. So anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I know I did. When next we meet for this little book club, I guess that's kind of what it is. When next we meet, though, we will start with the High Druid of Shannara. I decided to read, I think I mentioned this before, but I decided to read these 2 series consecutively, and then I'm going to go back into the past to read The Word and the Void and the Genesis of Shannara. Now, the publication order is a little bit janky. I think Word and the Void's first, then this, then Genesis, then High Druid. High Druid and Genesis are actually kind of, looking at the publication order, they kind of overlapped a little bit, actually. Kind of weird. Anyway, until next time, everybody.